Before you see it, you hear it. A low moan building from somewhere beyond the ridge of the horizon. Not mechanical at first, more elemental, like the earth itself exhaling in fury. Then it sharpens into something stranger. A banshee howl threaded through with a reedy, harmonic whistle, rising in pitch and urgency as the angle of dive steepens. By the time a Japanese soldier on a Pacific beach or a North Korean artilleryman in a mountain pass identified that sound, it was already too late. The Vought F4U Corsair was already on top of them. That sound, that haunting, oscillating wail, was not a design flaw. It was not an accident. It was the acoustic signature of one of the most aggressively engineered military aircraft ever built. The wing root intake scoops, feeding pressurized air into an elaborate oil cooling and supercharging system at speeds approaching 450 miles per hour, vibrated at frequencies that cut through the noise of battle like nothing else in the sky. Japanese forces coined a name for it almost immediately: Whistling Death. And in the pantheon of wartime nicknames, few have ever been more precisely earned. This is not merely the story of a fighter aircraft. This is a technical autopsy, a deep dissection of an engineering paradox that became a legend. The F4U. 4 Corsair was a machine born from contradiction. Too powerful for the airframe that had to contain it, too large for the carrier decks it was designed to fly from, and too aerodynamically unforgiving for the average naval aviator to master without considerable risk of his own life. And yet, against every institutional objection and engineering obstacle, it evolved. It adapted. It dominated. By the time the Corsair's production line finally went cold in December 1952, making it the longest-running American piston-engined fighter program in history, the F4U had accumulated a kill ratio against Japanese aircraft of 11-1. It had carried the war from the jungles of Guadalcanal to the frozen ridgelines of the Chosin Reservoir. It had served with the United States Navy, the United States Marine Corps, the Royal Navy, the Royal New Zealand Air Force, and a dozen other operators. It had been a fleet defender, a ground attack platform, a close air support workhorse, and a night fighter. And at the center of all those roles, in its most capable and refined expression, stood the variant we are here today to examine in full, the F4U-4. Welcome to Warplane Resolve. Tonight, we pull back every panel, open every cowl flap, and trace every hydraulic line of the bent wing bird. Before you see it, you hear it. A low moan building from beyond the horizon. Not mechanical at first, more elemental, like the earth itself exhaling in fury. Then it sharpens. Banshee howl rising in pitch as the dive steepens. By the time a Japanese soldier on a Pacific beach identified that sound, it was already too late. Japanese forces named it almost immediately, Whistling Death. In the pantheon of wartime nicknames, few have ever been more precisely earned. The Corsair's story begins not with a drawing board, but with an engine. In 1938, the United States Navy issued a specification of unprecedented ambition. They wanted the fastest carrier-based fighter in the world. Not competitive, not adequate. The fastest, the only power plant on the American market capable of delivering that performance, was the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, an 18-cylinder, twin-row radial engine displacing 2,804 cubic inches and producing nearly 2,000 horsepower. For context, the Navy's frontline fighter at the time, the Grumman F4F Wildcat, ran on 1,200 horsepower. Vought engineer Rex Beisel was being asked to build a carrier aircraft around a power plant 70% more powerful than anything currently flying off a deck. The I-2800 was not just powerful, it was physically enormous. And the engine itself was only half the problem. An engine producing 2,000 horsepower must transfer that energy to the air through a propeller of proportional scale. The Hamilton Standard unit specified for the Corsair measured 13 feet 4 inches in diameter, over 4 meters of spinning aluminum on a single-engine aircraft designed to operate feet above the Pacific Ocean. The standard fix for propeller-to-ground clearance is straightforward. Lengthen the undercarriage legs. But on a carrier aircraft, that solution carries a savage penalty. Longer legs must withstand the violent arrested landing loads that slam a fighter from approach speed to zero in roughly 2 seconds. The structural weight required to make long legs carrier-worthy would have consumed most of the performance advantage the powerful engine was supposed to deliver. Long gear is also dynamically unstable under the lateral loads of a crosswind deck landing, an unacceptable risk on a pitching, heaving flight deck. Rex Beisel's answer was among the most celebrated pieces of intuitive engineering in aviation history: the inverted gull wing. Rather than extending the gear legs downward, he bent the wing itself, angling it sharply downward at the root by approximately 23 degrees, then sweeping it back upward at the fold point to a conventional outer panel. This geometry dropped the wing root to the lowest possible fuselage position, allowing the main undercarriage legs to be extraordinarily short, just 9 inches, while still clearing the massive propeller arc. Short legs meant robust lightweight gear, fully capable of handling carrier deck loads. The aircraft's instantly recognizable bent wing silhouette was not aesthetic flourish. It was a direct mechanical consequence of a propeller that was, by any conventional measure, too large for the aircraft it was attached to. The early F4U, one that emerged from this process, was blindingly fast. The first American single-engine aircraft to exceed 400 miles per hour, but operationally troubled. Poor forward visibility over the long nose, a dangerously stiff oleo strut that caused violent deck bouncing on landing, and an asymmetric stall driven by engine torque led the Navy to initially reject it for carrier operations entirely. The Ensign Killer nickname followed, but Vought's engineers refused to accept the verdict as final. Through successive variants, they lengthened the tail wheel, revolved the landing gear, raised the cockpit, and refined every deficiency, until the aircraft the Navy had once rejected became the premier carrier fighter of the Pacific War, and then its ultimate expression, the F4U. 4, the most powerful and capable piston-engine naval aircraft in history. The Corsair's airframe was, for its era, a masterpiece of structural engineering under constraint. Among its most radical manufacturing choices was the spot-welded wingskin, a deliberate departure from the riveted aluminum panel standard on virtually every other combat aircraft of the period. Rivets, however carefully countersunk, create surface discontinuities that generate measurable drag at high speed. Vaught's flush spot welded panels eliminated these protrusions entirely, yielding a genuinely smooth aerodynamic surface that contributed directly to the aircraft's exceptional top speed. The technique was more demanding to manufacture and harder to repair in the field, but the performance gain justified every complication. The wing root intake scoops, the source of that haunting battlefield whistle, were an elegant solution to the R2800's ferocious thermal management demands. Rather than hanging oil coolers beneath the engine in a drag-inducing chin scoop, Vought buried them inside the wing roots and fed them through precisely sized leading-edge intakes.
Hold it, looking good.
The right-wing scoop additionally supplied the two-stage supercharger's intake
Lowering
charge.
it now.
At
Easy.
cruise conditions,
Looking
these
good.
ducts function
here.
silently and efficiently. But during a high-speed dive, as airflow velocity surged well beyond design parameters, the duct geometry acted as an acoustic resonating chamber. The column of air within oscillated at its natural frequency, producing that pure, penetrating, variable pitch whistle that Japanese forces named Whistling Death. Modern computational fluid dynamics simulations of the intake geometry reproduced this signature precisely. It was not a flaw, but an inevitable consequence of physics being pushed past its design envelope. The Korean War gave the Corsair an unexpected and brutal second act. By 1950, the F4U-4 was the most capable piston fighter in the American inventory. and Marine Corps aviators flew it into conditions that tested every margin the design possessed. At the Chosin Reservoir in December 1950, Corsair pilots provided the close air support that allowed the 1st Marine Division to break out of encirclement, flying delivery passes so close to friendly lines that they could read the faces of the Marines below. The aircraft's 2,450 horsepower gave it the energy to pull out of weapons runs in terrain that would have trapped anything less powerful. And its proven structure absorbed the punishment without complaint. Remarkably, F4U. 4 pilots even scored kills against early jet aircraft in low-altitude engagements, where the Corsair's superior turn rate and power partially offset the MiG's speed. The final proof of a design that had reached the absolute limit of piston engine achievement. The Corsair's production run closed in December 1952, a full decade after the first examples entered service, and years after jets had assumed the primary combat roles in both the Navy and Air Force. No other American piston fighter came close to this longevity. The P-51 Mustang was out of production by 1945. The F-6F Hellcat, the Pacific War's dominant fleet fighter, followed shortly after. The Corsair outlasted them all because its fundamental architecture, powerful engine, clean airframe, massive ordnance capacity, proved adaptable to every mission requirement that a decade of evolving warfare could produce. The Corsair's story is ultimately a story of engineering resolve. Its early deficiencies were real and costly. The Navy's initial rejection from carrier operations was rational, not timid. What followed was a methodical campaign of systematic refinement. Lengthened tailwheel, revalved oleo struts, upgraded engine, 4-bladed propeller, redesigned cockpit, expanded hardpoints. That transformed a brilliant but dangerous prototype into the finest carrier-based piston fighter history has ever seen. 13 feet of spinning aluminum, 41 feet of inverted gull wing, 2,450 horsepower, and a whistle that enemies learned to fear. That was the F4U-4 Corsair that was resolved. This has been Warplane Resolve, where we do not merely recount history, but disassemble it, examine it under full light, and put it back together so that you understand not just what was built, but why, and how, and at what cost. If this deep dive into the F4U-4 Corsair gave you something, a deeper appreciation for the physics of piston aviation, for the stubborn ingenuity of the engineers at Vought, for the courage of the Marine and Navy pilots who bent this magnificent, dangerous machine to their will across 2 wars, then share it, subscribe, and let us know in the comments which warplane you want us to autopsy next. The propellers are still turning.
Yes! Oh my God, yes! I did it! We did it!